VUCA, our hot theme today, contains complexity. Our next speaker comes all the way from South Africa, that way, and brings with her insights about how to navigate complexity, sense-making, and kinefin. To bring a bit of coolness to this hot topic, please welcome Sonja Lisbon.
Good morning. Good morning. I think sometimes the only thing that you need to know about me is that I'm from South Africa, and that will tell you why I'm fascinated with complexity. But I'm a meteorologist by training, so I come from the natural sciences, so I'm quite informed by that. But I think today I am going to be taking a bit of a different tack. So you're not going to be getting any theory from me or any frameworks, not in the lightning talk at least, because there's something that I'm curious about but also frustrated about. Because I think many of us here already have an understanding, an intellectual understanding of complexity. You know, I can give you the definition. You know, so complex, it means entangled or braided together. And we know that complex systems are uncertain, they're emergent, you don't have any control. We know all of these things. And yet, we still fall back to our old, ordered ways of doing things. So that intellectual, conceptual understanding is really not enough. It's not sufficient. And much of the problem in terms of how we act is structural. You know, we are embedded in systems where the structures, the incentives, all of these things keep us stuck. But then at the same time, if you think about those structures, what keeps them in place to a large extent are humans, hence human factors. It's still the people who are making those decisions. It's the collective behavior and collective beliefs that to a large extent hold those structures in place. And so while I don't necessarily believe change happens one person at a time, I don't believe we can remove the human. And very interesting things happen to humans when we're in complexity. So that's partly what I want to explore. Now, the biggest complexity for me at the moment is sticking to my 20 minutes, but I am going to ask you to do something. I want you to imagine. So we are in Portugal. And the other day we went to, we've been playing tourist for a week, and we ended up at this monument. And I was struck by just for a moment, close your eyes. Just close your eyes. Just bear with me. I think you're safe in this room. I hope so. Depends on who's sitting next to you. But just close your eyes and just imagine a few hundred years ago, wooden ship getting ready to sail off into the unknown, hopefully with a captain you trust and a crew you trust, some provisions that might last you a few weeks or a few months, but you've got no idea what lies on the other side of this open ocean. You're heading into the unknown, you don't know what you'll find, and you don't know if you're going to come back. Can you imagine that? The spirit of exploration that was alive in Portugal and in other places at that time, it feels to me that, to a large extent, we've lost that as humans. And so where are we today? It's interesting, I actually came across this podcast. I'm a conference organizer's worst nightmare, because I finish my slides like 5 minutes before I come up, so that's just... But I listened to this podcast a few days ago, and this is a psychotherapist, Esther Perel. Just need to get my slides to advance. And she says, we have a form of assisted living. So we're surrounded by predictive technologies, Waze, Netflix, Spotify, that tells us what to watch next, what to listen to, where to go next, sometimes even what to eat next. And so we're less and less in contact with our own choices, our own doubts, our own deliberations, our own preferences. And so we're less and less able to deal with uncertainty. And I'm just as guilty of this as probably all of you. I mean, we've been exploring the last few weeks, and we've been like on City Mapper. We don't allow ourselves to get lost. Not even in a city where even if we do get lost, we know at some stage we'll be found. It's not like we're heading into the unknown and we might not come back. But we like that convenience. We want to feel in control. We want the certainty. And I think this is a problem. And so what this does is it creates an adversarial relationship with complexity. So I'm a big fan of complexity. I'm probably one of the few people who gets excited when I talk about complexity. I've been working in that field since before it became a thing. I think at the moment we're at risk of complexity becoming a bit of a fad. But I've been working in the field for a very long time, but we've got this adversarial relationship with it. And what happens is we don't necessarily see it as something, that's invitational. And one of the things that I speak about, and this is, the slide that I pressed the button a little bit too soon, is this idea of how do we become fit for that complexity? And by fitness, I mean two things, but it's less the image the image of the guy doing the press-ups, although that definitely is part of it. We do need to be mentally and physically fit to be able to be in complexity. It's more the image of the leopard, so now you can see the African coming through. That leopard is perfectly adapted. He's perfectly fit for his environmental niche. And so this is not survival of the fittest. This is about, are we able to adapt to the context that we're in? Are we able to become fit for the complexity? And if we want to be fit for complexity, we can't have an adversarial relationship with it. So we see it as a challenge to act on. It's very interesting. When I first got interested in complexity, you never really saw articles on it in business magazines like Harvard Business Review. And then they started coming through, and then they always have verbs attached like solve, simplify. Taming complexity is my favorite one, as if you could. Avoid, eliminate, reduce. How many of you have heard this? It's like complexity is something we need to get rid of. And I don't believe that's helpful. And when you have acronyms like VUCA or Barney that tells you that the world is brittle and incomprehensible, I think is the I. I can never remember all of them. It's not particularly inviting, is it? We kind of just want to ignore the complexity and move on. And I don't think that that is helpful. And this is another problem. What you resist persists. So the more we resist the complexity, the more we kind of try to ignore it, the more we try to tame it, the more entangled we become in it. There we go. So complexity is not only a context we act on, it is a context we act in. And what I find really interesting is if you think about it, complexity is life. Almost any sentence that you can use the word complexity in, you can substitute it for the word life. We've made complexity a thing, as if it's external to us, as if we are victims to the complexity. But in a very real sense, we are complexity. If you understand how the human body works, we are complexity. And we're embedded in complex systems called families. Little children know how to navigate complexity. They know which parent to go to for what. But we've kind of made this thing. One of my favorite things, there's a billboard and a friend of mine came across it while he was stuck in traffic. And he didn't quite appreciate it at the time because it says, "You're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic." And what I see so much in the clients I work with is we feel as if we're victims to all the change and all the complexity, and then we lose our sense of agency. But if we can realize that we are traffic, we're part of the patterns that we're stuck in, then it also gives us back a sense of agency. And so complexity, I believe, invites us into curiosity and exploration, and I guess the full expression of our humanity, which I think is becoming more and more important with the rise of AI. And so I wanted to kind of bring that message today, is can we see the complexity as something that is inviting, that is beautiful? yes, it's challenging sometimes. Some of the complex patterns, I don't like to call them problems because then we think that we can linearly solve them. There are some really challenging patterns out there facing humanity that we need to be, engaging with. But if I frame it as a problem to solve, I'm immediately stuck because it's too big. How do I solve climate change? How do I solve systemic poverty? But if I can see it as a pattern, an entangled pattern with many, many different variables, I've got many, many different ways that I can potentially interact or dance with it. And complexity is beautiful. Any natural system, there's beauty there. If everything was certain, you could never have adventures. I don't know if you've ever thought of that. How boring would life be if everything was certain? But we want it to be certain, and I'm sure Delia at some stage will talk to you about the brain and how, humans are wired to want certainty and to want control, but sometimes in complexity we can't have that. And so if we can see it as something that is inviting and beautiful, not only a challenge, then we can find different ways of interacting with it. And so to respond to this invitation, we need to create contexts very intentionally where we can practice being cool. And I'm sure there are many of the academically minded complexity practitioners who probably rolls their eyes at this idea, but people can remember cool. And cool is an acronym for 4 practices, 4 ways of being that really helps us when we want to become more exploratory. So I'm going to go through them one at a time. The first, the C, is for courage. And there are many ways that we can have courage in complexity. Sometimes as a leader, just saying, I don't know, requires a lot of courage because we live in a world that expects leaders to know where you're going, have the answers. But I like to think of it as courage to soften or relax into complexity. Because remember, what you resist persists. So can we acknowledge the complexity, allow it, and then dance with it? Donella Meadows talks about we dance with complexity. And I don't know how many of you have tried to dance with somebody that's really stiff. It doesn't really help, it doesn't work. So how do we soften into it instead of having this adversarial relationship with it? And none of this is easy. I love being in control. So I had flights that got delayed and all of this, and I had to keep reminding myself, Sonja, just soften because you can't do anything about it. You're going to give yourself a really bad experience if you are going to get all worked up about this. And so this is very applicable to life, not just to business. But can we just allow the complexity? Not everything is complex. I'm sure those of you who are familiar with Cynefin, there are things that's complicated and simple. But we're always, whenever we're around other humans, we're in complexity. So acknowledge, allow, dance, soften. Openness is the second one. Openness to novelty, to difference, to diversity, different perspectives, to learning and unlearning, to doing things differently, to letting go, and to change. We kind of believe that stability is normal, but actually continuous change is normal. So can we be open to that? And here, thinking about things like the language we use. We use so many nouns that de-animate our world. It's like, I find it very ironic that complexity is a noun when nothing about complexity is really stable. If we can start thinking about the world in terms of process, that things are always changing. It's always in flux. And we want it to be that way. And also then to value diversity. We've made diversity a problem to solve as well. Especially, I come from South Africa, where it's a very thorny topic. But diversity is the key to our resilience. So if we can look at diversity through the lens of complexity, it completely changes how we think about it. And then the second O is for observing. Observing, and this very much is a practice. And I think, I'm hoping that Nigel and Ponch will touch on some of these things because I think this is very much key to things like the flow system and the OODA loop, etc. But, observing is around contextual awareness. Am I observing what's happening around me? And again, here, diversity is important because on your own, you can't see enough. But then also, am I observing internally? the internal patterns, like when I am in uncertainty, what happens, what triggers me? And can I not just have a knee-jerk reaction, can I choose intentionally how I want to respond? So this is zooming into the details, zooming out, and then it's also zooming outside and zooming inside. And so it very much is about awareness. And some of these patterns are, we love comfort. Humans love comfort, and I include myself in that. We want to be comfortable, we want to have convenience, and to get that, we seek clarity, we don't want ambiguity and nuance. We seek certainty, and we seek control. And it's very human. One of the things that I always do is I normalize this. We all do this. But we can't afford not to be aware of it. Because if we keep seeking almost illegitimate clarity and certainty and control, that is when we end up making things worse, or just keeping the status quo in place that's no longer serving us. And then finally, my favorite one, the L, is lightness. And this is about, it's the core of our humanity, it's our humanness, it's the humor and the playfulness, and finding replenishment in beauty. I think that's why so many of us love spending time in nature, because it's replenishing. And it's interesting that we go to complexity, we go to complex systems, we go to ecosystems to relax. And it's also human connection, but also connection to the environment, connection to nature, that sense of being connected to something bigger than ourselves. And we use the language of play in business. I mean, how many of you have said, let's go play with the numbers, play with the strategy? Have you ever really played with the numbers and the strategy? We like to use the language, we don't really play. When was the last time you laughed together as a team? And the other thing here is, so it's play, it's imagination, it's intuition, all of these things, but also then rest. We don't rest enough. We're in a culture that, we almost worship being busy. And if you never have time to think, you're going to burn out, and you're going to make very stupid decisions, and you're going to become irrelevant. Because we need time to learn. The world is changing all around us. So lightness, and it's really interesting, many of my clients, when we have cool days, so we take them through various workshops, and then they'll say, lightness is the thing that we need the most, but we can't have it. In our culture, we can't, And we also have this thing of play and imagination. It's for children. I'm a mature adult. I'm supposed to be I'm like a serious complexity expert. I can't tell a joke, can't play. We need to get out of that. Especially because that's the essence of creativity, is our ability to play and imagine. And so I believe we need to learn to be wayfinders, and I've got that S in there for a reason, again. We need to get back to that spirit of exploration. And there are still some people around. I'm not, this is a very general statement. But in general, I think most of us, we kind of prefer the safety and the convenience and the comfort of, just keeping things safe. It's very difficult sometimes to be on that boundary between feeling competent, feeling incompetent. Knowing, not knowing. I love Tim Ingold says, wayfinding is not being able to know before you go, but knowing as you go. And now we're back where we started with, if we've got all of these tools, we've got GPSs, we've got maps, we want to know before we go. And, sometimes when somebody brings you, if you're a business leader, a decision maker, brings you something that's a little bit different, the first question is, where has this worked before? Prove to me this will work before I'm willing to try it. And I think this is the invitation of complexity, is can we become explorers and wayfinders again? And in my hour session a bit later on, we'll be doing a bit of a deeper dive into how do we become wayfinders. I think that is, I'm at the end of my time, so thank you very much.